Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Xperience Beyond podcast. Today, we are diving into a topic that's shaking the boardrooms everywhere. What happens when customer experience is not seen as an investment, but as a cost center? The theme today's podcast is, would the CFO fire your CX team? And I think it's a very provocative topic. I am your host, Anand Nigam, co-founder of director of XEBO.ai. And joining me today is someone who has been fearlessly calling out the gaps, the jargon, the fluff in the CX world for years. Hello, in customer experience, you are undoubtedly come across his work. Adrian Swinscoe is one of the most influential and refreshingly honest voices in the industry. He is a best-selling author, advisor, speaker, and the mind behind the disruptive and widely acclaimed concepts like Punk CX and Punk Excel. Adrian has spent over 25 years helping companies from global brands like Apple, KFC, and Pearson's to ambitious, fast-going SMEs. He's built experiences that are simpler, more human, and undoubtedly more effective. He's a long-time Forbes contributor, a respected thinker, and the host for one of the most insightful CX podcasts out there. Adrian's work challenges leaders to cut unnecessary complexity, question outdated assumptions, and focus on what genuinely drives value, both customers and the business. In this episode, Adrian and I will explore how many CFOs doubt the ROI of CX teams, how CX leaders can improve value through outcomes and not activities, the mindset and the matrix that earn a seat in the executive table, and whether the future of CX requires rethinking at all levels. Whether you are a CX leader, a strategist, or someone trying to align customer outcomes with the business results, this conversation is going to push your thinking in the right ways. Let's dive in and welcome to the podcast, Adrian.
Hi, Anand. Blimey, I'm going to have to work really hard to live up to that kind of that introduction. But I'll do my best. I mean, I'm here to shake a few trees.
Absolutely. And we have got a very hot topic, Adrian, which is, would the CFO fire your CX team? How does it resonate with CX teams?
So would they fire the CX team? Well, maybe. And I can imagine kind of like, a CFO walks into there's a CX team and they have an office and they're all beavering away, and the CFO kind of like walks in and goes, right, prove your relevance. And I think they what would happen. I mean, and that's particularly relevant kind of round about now because we're getting towards the end of the calendar year at the time of recording, and many people are on annual kind of like planning and budgeting cycles for kind of like for 2026 and so on and so forth. So somebody comes in like a CFO and says, "Prove your relevance." Most of the people in that room would react with them. The blood would drain from their faces. First of all, they would have this sense of horror, probably kind of palpitations, a bit of anxiety, because many CX teams have struggled to prove the ROI, the demonstrable ROI of their initiatives. And so I think that the customer experience sort of space discipline, the teams, the personnel, are almost always under threat because many of them can't prove their ROI, and that's what brings on the horror. And so, but it's necessary. You have to do it, and I think the CX kind of like space has been failing itself by not doing that, by not digging in.
So why do you see, I mean, in your experience, why do so many CFOs, they still see CX as a cost center rather than a growth driver? What should,
Because
CXOs do to change that perception?
I'll start with a story to try and illustrate a point, and then I'll zoom out and give you a bit of a frame. So I remember doing a piece of work with a with a colleague, and we were asked to go and this is a story I've told before, but it's a useful story. And we were asked to go and audit some of their initiatives or efforts they'd made in the kind of the experience space. And we went to see them in their offices, and they said, "Oh, we've done all this and journey mapping and this kind of surveying and blah blah blah, all these different sort of things." And it was all nice and by the book and everything else. And they developed these new concepts and rolled out some pilots and things. And we're like, okay, fine. So like, okay, they were going, we want to know we're not really getting that much traction kind of so far. We want to understand, what we should be doing next to get that traction. Right. And I was like, okay, fine. I said, okay, tell me about the core business. Now, the business itself is a life insurance business, right? And I said, tell me about the core business. Is it growing? Is it stable? What sort of big problems do they have? And they said, no, it's growing. It's like an old business. It's been around for decades. It's successful. It's growing, single digits per year, but that's pretty good for the space that they're in. And they said so it's a pretty simple kind of business, but says the biggest kind of problem comes about when people die and people have to make claims on their life insurance, right?
Right.
So some of the big assumptions that they make is that many people make is like when you're supposed to have in what we call in the UK power of attorney listed or sorted out on a life insurance policy. So when you pass away, then you have very clearly stated people that are either recipients or can administer, nominees that can administer the kind of policy. Now, if you don't, many people assume that they've all got all that covered, but many people don't.
Right.
And when people kind of like a relative passes away, and then you're calling up the life insurer, then to prevent fraud, because this is a real thing, you have to go through some very, very stringent identity checks, security and privacy sort of stuff. And that's both hard for the person who's calling up, who's just had a bereavement and trying to administer some of this stuff. And it's really hard for the person who's speaking on the phone, because you're basically saying, they're going, I want to know about this, and you're telling them no. And that becomes a really difficult sort of thing. It's one of the massive problems, one of the really big problems that the life insurance.
Absolutely. I think it's one of the biggest moment of truth.
Yeah, of course.
Insurance.
And it costs the business so much time and effort and puts so much pressure on that, on both sides, customer and employee. And I said to them, like, okay, fine. What have you done to try, using your skills and your insights, what have you done to try and improve that part of the business? Tumbleweed, like zero. I'm like going, but that's crazy. You've got all these skills and all these techniques and all these tools and stuff. But what you haven't done is you haven't tackled a really knotty kind of problem for the business that can have a massive impact on both customers, on the customer side, and also a massive impact on the.
So you have identified the biggest friction point. The question is then how you are removing the friction.
Exactly. And you can then quantify what you gain from removing that friction, both on the customer side and also the employee side.
Absolutely.
By using all these different tools. Now, the reason I use this story is because it's about, you can take people that work in the CX space and their skills, and then you can map them to the kind of core business. And that's when you get relevance. If you get relevance and you can actually remove some of that friction, you get demonstrable ROI, right? And so the thing that I kind of think about with that sort of this is a really long answer to a very short question, but I think it's important.
No, it's very relevant, important, yes.
So I think here's the thing, is that if we zoom out, I think most businesses are built on the same sort of chassis. Like, it's like our ability to generate awareness, / potential demand, our ability to convert that potential into custom will drive the number of customers we have in any given period, right? Then we go, how much we we buy on per transaction, how much we spend per transaction, that whole buying experience, and then how frequently we do that over the course of any given period will drive your revenue, right? Then you've got your cost of operations, and that will drive your profitability. Now,
Right.
here's the thing. Most people kind of like can get caught up in this idea of like, oh, we need to drive more customers, more revenue, more profitability, without understanding that you can't do those three things. You actually, because they're outcomes of potential conversion, transaction, amount of transaction, frequency of transaction, and the cost of operations. Those are the five things. Those are the levers. And I say to people, it's like, if your initiatives cannot point to positively influencing one or more of those five levers, then you are not going to be able to drive relevance and demonstrable ROI. Now, those are the things you have to do first. You might, and the must-haves to get relevance in the CFO's kind of like office. They may, once you've built that confidence, allow you to do things that are a little bit more harder to directly prove, the kind of the direct causation, the causative links. But that's the challenge. You have to work hard to do these sort of things, and have to understand that you operate in a system, and you have to make yourself relevant to that system. And if that system, when the chief decision makers in that system is a CFO, hello, then you have to talk the CFO's language and make sure that you're relevant to the CFO.
Absolutely. In fact, the example that you took, Adrian, especially in the life insurance, it's one of the biggest moment of truth is when people are actually using the benefit of the life insurance because someone got deceased, and that's where you can claim.
Yeah.
Right. And that's one of the biggest, and that's where you have created more hurdles. And it's a very tough example to actually justify how you are actually helping the business to generate more revenue or reduce cost or be making sure that the claims are rightfully done. That's what you're going to solve at that moment of truth.
Yeah.
Similar could be examples like, for example, a different in the same banking sector. If you take, for example, mortgage process. Now, customers, when they go through the entire mortgage process and paperwork, they find it so difficult. And many of them actually go for an easier option to get the mortgage instead of going through a bank, which is very regiment and, goes through the entire KYC and all those requirement details.
Yeah.
Now, if a CX guy goes and transforms the entire process of mortgage processing, right, you can see it before and after. How did it impact the number of mortgages that the company is doing?
That's
and that could be an interesting.
That speaks to the conversion.
Correct.
You generate the kind of the potential demand that speaks to the conversion. If you can prove the delta on that, that just drops through. If other things remaining constant, you will see the impact of the profitability and our revenue and or the number of customers. That's the point of it all. Is like figure out where you can make a kind of a demonstrable kind of change to one of those levers, and everything else is going to fall out of it.
Right. I mean, that's the only way I feel the CX team can actually start looking at linking it to growth drivers or conversions and all, and prove that point that it's not a cost center, but it's a revenue driver.
Exactly. And I think the thing is, like, somebody might go, oh, it's not as simple as that. You're like going, well, it might not be. But here's the thing, at least you've got more evidence to build a stronger case to go, if we did this or we're doing this, this is what we see, what we measure as being the kind of the impact, and that's kind of what we think the ROI is on that. And somebody might kind of dispute that. It says, oh, that's not just all about you. There's other initiatives around you. Like going, fine, but at least make the case.
Right. I've come across another matrix which people often monitor to show the impact, CX initiatives are having on the company. And typically they end up monitoring, say, and which is what we do at XEBO. We actually see companies elevate their NPS and CSAT scores when they listen to the customer systematically through surveys and take some actions based on the feedback that they are getting. Now, how do you think matrices like this, like NPS and CSAT, can be framed in a way that actually makes sense to a CFO and not to a CX guy?
So now maybe this might be slightly controversial, but here's the thing: if you want to build a relationship with somebody, do you not think you should start by learning their language?
Mhm.
If that's true, then ask yourself. Then the question that CX professionals need to be asking themselves, or CX leaders need to be asking themselves, is like, is NPS or CSAT part of the CFO's traditional lexicon? Is it part of their language?
Okay.
And if it's not, then why are you trying to impress your metrics onto the CFO? Why don't you can actually try and learn the CFO's language first and foremost? Now, we also need to understand that there's a problem with many organizations in that they start using NPS and CSAT and they start chasing their scores rather than actually chasing relevant outcomes, right? Which might be
Right.
customer or employee or business outcomes. We've all heard the stories where somebody's gone, we've got a great NPS, but we are bleeding money at the back door. Having a high NPS or high CSAT score doesn't actually prove that you've got a viable business. It's just a measure.
Right.
Um, and I think that's the thing that we need to see it for what it is that there's a great there's a thing called Goodhart's law. Comes from I can't forget his first name, but Professor Goodhart, who was a professor at LSE in the 1970s, but was also a member of the board of a member of the board of governors at the Bank of England for a time, and he wrote a paper talking about financial instruments back in the 1970s. And one of the things that came out of it was this phrase, which has been attributed to more than financial services kind of instruments. And he said, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure,
Very wise words.
right? That's called
Right.
Goodhart's law. And I think that's one of the kind of the challenges is that people use measures as targets. Like, I'll give you a very simple example. You know, because it's all about being appropriate. What is the appropriate, target or measure, or whatever. Imagine you were driving along in a car and you were doing 13 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, right? On a highway or a smooth motorway or whatever, a big multi-carriage kind of like road with smooth tarmac, going along at that speed, it'd be like you hum along, it's a smooth ride, right? Imagine if you're doing the same speed on an old country road up to a farm or whatever, which is not paved, and it's all going to be rocky and bumpy and things. Completely different experience,
Absolutely.
right? But if your target was let's hit 40 miles an hour, it's like it doesn't kind of tell you kind of a lot. It's
So,
the
so you are
same,
getting your target, but bad experience.
right? And it's like, so it's what is appropriate now. And I think that's what we have to think about. We need to be very intentional about what we're doing and why we're doing it. And to understand that NPS and CSAT, they are measures
Right.
to help us understand the progress that we're making and how people feel about kind of things, and to hopefully to provide kind of insights as to what's going well, what's possibly not going so well. But also that we also need to understand that surveying people can also be partial in that only people that are unhappy or only people that are delighted are the most likely to respond. And actually, we need to be listening more broadly
Right.
across all channels to sort of understand what is the broad picture of the experience and not just rely on surveys alone.
How about the right analytics? So one is the survey, and you are monitoring the outcome results in form of NPS and linking it to different variables.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of right analytics do you see can be done to actually showcase to CFOs the impact the CX is having, whether it's to do with your revenues, whether it's to do with customer loyalty or retention? How should we do those kind of analysis with the results?
Well, I think the thing it's about what happens once you've generated when you've done the analytics and you generated the insights is what happens afterwards. So I think that the feedback that we get from customers, the people that get the most and the greatest amount of real-time feedback from customers are people that work in service support, contact center sort of spaces.
Right.
If you want to know everything that's going on with your business in that moment, then you should go and speak to those people. They'll tell you everything that you need to know. But the point is most of those folks and those that are dealing with those frontline queries, when you do the analytics and trying to uncover some of these insights, oh, these are some of the issues. What doesn't happen is the plumbing between that team and the other parts of the organization. Like, for example, your service team or support team might be hearing about all sorts of different problems to do with your product in the kind of the moment, or it might be to do with your app or whatever. If
Yeah.
that's not kind of like funneled straight through to the kind of the product team to say, hey, you've got a problem with this, and then they fix it just like that.
Mm.
If you can then start to do that connectivity, then you can start to really demonstrate this is the value of doing this listening and this analytical work when we've got all that piping, the plumbing through to these other teams, and the other teams pay attention to that and then act on that. Then you can start to see the causal links. We heard this. We kind of it surfaced here in our analytics program. We piped it through to the product team. The product team kind of did this. The demand for that fell off.
Absolutely.
Ta-da! But that requires being a connected enterprise that values
Right. So
and
you are
risk.
actually hinting towards, yeah, you are actually hinting towards my next question, which is like how CFOs and CX leaders become allies. And you are advocating that if the CX leaders can start linking the feedback, the survey, or whatever channel that they are getting the feedback from, connecting it to certain business decisions,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's to do with product, whether it's to do with service, whether it's to do with processes, if we
Mm-hmm.
can start connecting that feedback into improving or some action, whether it's be it product, service, or process, that's where they become allies.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because what you're doing is you are taking this valuable kind of like gold mine of data that is coming in real time across numbers of channels, and then also including kind of like survey data into that, and you're listening more broadly on that, and you're surfacing um, problems and intents or ideas or suggestions, all these different sort of things, and you're looking at it, and rather than just putting it into a report and then sending it off and it gets reviewed at some sort of monthly kind of meeting, it's like,
Right.
no, you have to kind of say we need to be operating in real time. And if these things are fixable, or you can get them onto somebody's agenda or onto somebody's radar to say, oh, this is a quick fix, or this is a big thing, or this is something that needs more work. There's like, you can set alarm bells kind of going, but that only comes about when people understand what the flows of this data and insight and information can achieve, but also that they value and they respect the roles that different parties play in that whole ecosystem.
Right. So, how would you advise a CX leader on if he is supposed to create a PNL for the boardroom related to his work? What role does in that boardroom PNL or dashboard should NPS, CSAT, and insights play to make an impact?
I would say that you don't lead with NPS and CSAT.
Mhm.
They are but measures, they're metrics. Um, I think you go back to those kind of different the chassis I talk about, and you
Yeah,
go, look, I think you come up with a hypotheses, as it were, which might be, I think our insight data tells us we're facing problems at here, 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 and here, and I believe that we can do A, B, C, and D to improve those sort of things. We think they're going to have X, Y, and Z sort
impact.
of
Yeah.
impact, and that's going to drive kind of ROI. And if you
Now,
go
very
like,
useful.
oh, all of these different things, you're like, boom. And how will we know we're being successful? Because it'll show up in our insight data that includes NPS and CSAT and so on and so forth. But you start from the CFO and their language, and then you work back to the work that you're doing.
Absolutely. I think so. Two elements. One, instead of leading with NPS and CSAT, we need to lead the dashboard with very specific hardcore business related outcomes, which could be revenue, which could be retention, which could be reduction in attrition, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And the second very important thing is that list down what were the initiatives identified and what action was taken to improve the business.
Yeah, I mean, align them with those kind of like those things, because you know some people might look at that and go, "Oh, that's really hard." You're like, "Yeah, get over it." You know, this is an important job that you're doing, and you've got these incredible kind of like tools and technologies and techniques and things that are at your disposal. Just put your big boots on and step up. You know,
Absolutely.
this is kind of important. This is important work where you can have real impact. So don't shy away from it. Lean into it. And if you want help with this, then you don't have to do it on your own. Go and talk to your CFO. Go and talk to the financial analysts. They'll help you. Kind of tell me kind of like what are the things that I need to do in order to kind of make that kind of case. We're doing X, Y, and Z. We want to try and kind of make those links. Can you help us make those links? Make
Yeah,
friends over there.
that's Rian, actually, you have tackled this very. I felt it's a very controversial topic, but you have very simplified, put together how a CX leader should approach this topic. It can't be simpler than this
Yeah,
to
it's just like
justify
go
their
and
role.
just
Yeah,
go and talk to people.
absolutely.
Because I
No,
think the
that's
one thing,
awesome.
the one point I would make at the end, right, of the end of this kind of bit, is that the thing that we forget about all of this sort of stuff is that organizations are human systems
Hmm.
that we kind of like populate with processes and technology and infrastructure and all these different things. But ultimately, we're human systems. We create vehicles in order for humans to make things for other people to consume and or buy or use or enjoy or whatever. And that's kind of helped with all this kind of other stuff. And within that, um, the best organizations are the ones that are connected, but they're connected on a human level, which is built around relationships. We talk about building organizations that want to have better relationships with our customers.
Right.
That has to be built on a foundation, I think, of organizations that have better
Internal.
relationships with themselves.
Correct, absolutely. And that's where I think many people talk about EX and CX go hand in hand. You
Mm-hmm.
need to develop that EX culture within the organization to deliver great customer experiences.
Yeah, go and ask people, because they will tell you. They will happily share their expertise if you kind of like go and, rather than just tell them what you're going to do, ask for their help.
Right.
Respect their position and ask for their help.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Adrian. And this brings us to end of our this controversial topic for the CX leaders, how to justify their role to CFOs.
Uh-huh.
Now I've got a very simple, light-hearted round for rapid fire. So
Okay.
these are simple questions that I'll throw at you, and you can give simple answers. Whatever comes to your mind, there's nothing right or wrong in this.
Okay.
So are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. First question is, if you had to describe great customer experience in one word, what would it be?
One word. appropriate.
Nice. Second question. One brand you think is truly delivering simple, human, value-driven experiences right now?
Patagonia.
Nice. Third
Yves
question.
Chouinard is a legend. A values-driven, principle-driven individual
And
legend.
human.
You should check out. If anybody doesn't know Patagonia, they should check them out because they are in the face of all this competition on things, they are doing their thing.
I will definitely do that. One piece of CX fluff you wish companies would stop doing immediately.
Stop chasing metrics and start focusing on outcomes.
Absolutely. A small change you have seen that created a disproportionately big impact on the customer experience.
Actually connecting leaders with customers. So I'll explain what I mean by that. I think that I see sort of three different levels of leadership kind of behavior, because we all talk about want to be data-driven organizations, but I think there's different levels to this. The first level is that where we take data and it informs us, right? And that can be great. It takes us so far. But then if we add sort of all this, the color to that we can add stories to that, and stories move us because they add that extra dimension to it, the voice of the customer and all those sort of things. But I think you get real traction when you connect leaders to customers, because then they have direct access to their experience, and experiences compel us because we can't unfeel something. And so data informs, stories move, experiences compel us. And therefore, the biggest thing we need to do is connect our leaders as much as we can with customers directly, whatever way that you make that make sense for you.
Yeah, very deep, and I think very rightly put. My next question: if every CX leader could only fix one thing in their organization tomorrow, what should it be?
Their vision. In my experience, most brands, most CX leaders, you ask them what their vision is for the experience that they're trying to facilitate or trying to help create, and they'll come up with this assemblage of a bunch of random buzzwords. Oh, it's AI enabled and it's seamless and it's connected and blah, 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 blah. And it means absolutely nothing to nobody but them. It's just like a strap line. I think that most people don't really tell a good enough story, a sophisticated enough story about the experience that they want to deliver and what it means to different types of customers and at different points in their journey. And if you don't do that, then it becomes harder to build a strategy towards achieving that. And it's also harder for people to see themselves participating in helping achieve that. And so if I would encourage people to do something, is to take a moment or even a few moments and to think deeply and clearly and creatively about your vision for what is the experience that you want to deliver to your customers. And once it can feel like, oh, in this world where we've got to feel like we're busy doing something all of the time, that can feel like you're stepping off and taking a moment and looking like you're just thinking or telling stories. But it's the most valuable time that you'll spend getting clear on that, because we have to recognize we are story-driven people. And if we tell a better story about what it is we want to achieve, we'll take people with us. Well, it'll be easier to build towards, and people will see themselves participating in that more easily. And so that's a long answer to a one-word, a long explanation to a one-word answer is like vision.
Fix the vision is the concluding thought that I would like to leave and conclude my podcast today with, Adrian. What an insightful conversation. Thank you for your time. I think we discussed from redefining CX value, earning the executive or CFO trust. I think you have reminded us what survival in today's organization depends, improving, impacting, taking action, and not hiding behind the stuff like NPS and CSAT. And if CX teams don't adopt to this scenario, they don't talk the language of the CFO instead of expecting the CFO to understand their language, the CFO might make the calls. Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Adrian. I'm Anand Nigam. Thank you for tuning in. And remember, great experiences is not an expense. It's the engine of growth. See you next time.